Hey, teammates. I hope you are all having a great Friday. I'm sorry that I couldn't be there with you today, but I am in DC with a lot of other teachers this weekend, including tons of people who worked at National Prep before, and I will be sure to say hi to them for you. Also, happy birthday, Charisse. Don't want to forget to celebrate that as well. It's also my mom's birthday, so if you could send any birthday thoughts her way, I'm sure she would appreciate it. So today I want to focus on a few things that I'm noticing in our essays. And I think yesterday when we were looking at the MIST example, we saw that a lot of these prompts ask us about how something is done, not necessarily what is done. So in the MIST example, it was asking us, okay, here are these two texts, and they're both talking about the idea that everyday things can be made into games. But it's not asking us necessarily about that. It's asking us how each shows it. And so we came with things like, okay, does one use details? Does one show us pros and cons? Does one have more examples than the other? And that's the sort of thing we need in our claim. And I don't necessarily think we got there by the end of class. Strong claims would be something like, text one is more effective than I guess it's not compare and contrast. So text one conveys the theme by using one incredibly detailed example, whereas text two conveys this same theme, instead using many examples and psychological research to argue why everyday activities can be turned into games. So if your claims currently did not have a craft focus to them, then we're not totally there. And I'm worried that with the essay that we're writing right now that deals with the poem about Jose and then the short narrative that's similar about also being Latino in America, I'm worried that those essays were just sort of talking about the two texts rather than thinking about the idea, okay, what's going on and how can we convey these specific ideas? What are the craft moves that I need to analyze to understand how this message is being told, not just what the message is? And this is obviously like a very rigorous skill, so it makes sense that we need an extra time to practice it. So I'm going to pull up a couple of documents that I think are worth our looking at. So I'm going to pull these up and then we'll look for trends. The reason I pick these ones is I think that they're illuminating of things I'm seeing in a lot of people's papers. So hopefully if we look at these all together, we'll be able to then look at our own papers and say, hey, you know what, I think I'm falling into the same trap, or you know what, I think I did a really good job at putting this in my claim, but I still don't have enough transition words. So I'm going to share my screen with you so we can look at a few people's essays. Okay, so we'll start with this one, and the text is probably small because I can't share the whole screen. Okay, so I'm going to jump straight to this first body paragraph. One reason why always running more successfully explains the theme of having to hide or change their identity is the way people interact with the boy and his family. The first thing I'm going to point out here is that I want you to think really critically about how do you punctuate a title based on if it's a short story, a memoir, or a poem. Since this is a whole work, it needs to be punctuated in a certain way, and I think you remember hopefully what that is. Take a second, identify what the correct way to punctuate that is. Great. This is a topic sentence, and what I like about this topic sentence is that it does successfully tell us the question prompt. It says one reason why this story successfully explains a theme is because of the way people interact with the boy and his family. However, I think this is falling into the trap of it's talking about what the text is about, not how it is talking. So instead of saying something like, change their identity based on the way people interact with the boy and his family, we have to figure out, okay, but how is the author telling me this? And so I think even if we look at the quotes that have been included here, she spotted an empty spot on a park bench, but as soon as she sat down, an American woman with 3 kids of her own came by. Hey, get out of there, that's our seat. My mother understood, but didn't know how to talk back in English, so she tried in Spanish. So instead of saying in the way people interact with the boy or the family, we could say through dialogue. So all of the conversations that are in quotes. So we say explains the theme using dialogue. And this dialogue helps us understand, one, the limitations of the mother's speech, but also sort of these biases that we're seeing in other people, something like that. Okay, next. All right, in this one, I would like us to look at the intro paragraph. The 2 texts both show the idea that there is need of hiding or changing the main character's identity, because in the first text, it talks about how the kid named Jose is trying to change his identity by changing his name and accent. And in the second text, it talks about a person named Luis who lives with his family, and he tries to hide his identity by not connecting to American society. The first thing I'm going to point out here is we talked a little bit earlier this week about sentence variation, and this is a really, really long sentence. So I think there's a lot we could do here to break it up into smaller chunks. 1, so I as the reader don't get bored, but 2, I think it would also just be easier to understand. I believe the first text does a better job of specifying how the main character hides or changes his identity, because it gives a lot of evidence to support the idea that he is changing his identity. First thing I'm going to point out here is you can never, never, never use first person. So we need to write this, I believe that the first text does a better job in some other way. How could we say the same thing without saying I believe at the start? Hopefully we were able to revise that. The other thing I'm going to point out here is there are lots of hises and he's. The first text does a better job. This would be a time to name specifically, is this Jose we're talking about, or is this Luis we're talking about? Because that specificity will help me follow along. Because both of the protagonists, the main characters, are male in this case, I, as the reader, am very confused when I just see a he and I just see a his. So this person did a great job saying, okay, the way that they're doing this is giving really a ton of evidence. And I think my push here would be, how could we in the claim also talk about how the second text conveys a similar theme, but maybe not as well. Okay. In the poem, Becoming Joey, the theme of changing identity is better being developed by showing how worried he is because of his heritage. In the poem, it says, Joey straightens his shirt, tries to dust away the stains of ancestry, only then, becoming Joey, he crosses into school. This quote shows the reader that the stain of ancestry is like spilling coffee on your shirt. You'd be embarrassed and feel worried about who notices. This is how Jose feels. His heritage and his name show he is Latino and different from the other kids. What I think is great about this so far is that we're definitely making inferences with the evidence that we've got. So she says that the stain, comparing it to spilling coffee, like we talked about in class, and inferring, well, what would happen if I were doing that? I'd feel embarrassed, so he must feel embarrassed also. A quick point, when you are including quotes from poems, the line breaks are punctuated with dashes. So I'd say only then backslash becoming Joey backslash he crosses into school. So for every line of the poem, when there's a break to the next one, you put in that backslash. And I'd also specify, okay, this is lines, whatever it is, 10 to 12. I don't actually know what lines this, but okay. Again, I think this person is getting at the idea of craft, because it's saying, okay, it's focusing on this anxiety around heritage, but I need you to name a specific craft move. So even if the craft move is emphasis on anxiety, or focus on anxiety, focus on emotions, that in and of itself makes a much stronger topic sentence. The other push here is that this person did not include a one-sentence intro into their evidence, which we know we need. So I think a good move in these cases would be, all right, so we've got this poem. Spend a sentence explaining to me what the plot of the poem is. Otherwise, I'm seeing this Joey, Jose character just crossing into school, and I don't know enough about him to feel like I've actually understood the evidence. Finally, we have one that I think gets at the idea of, the idea of having craft at the heart of your claim a little bit better. So I just want to read these first couple sentences. In the poem, Becoming Joey develops the theme of needing to hide or change your identity by including details about the setting that surrounds Jose. This is a very specific craft move, saying details about setting. So in this last one, if we adopted that same thing, we could say including details about Jose's emotions. And we would see, I think, a similar improvement in these paragraphs. What I would like for you to do today is, because I'm not there, you are going to revise independently and focus specifically on the idea of, are you actually answering the claim or not? If you're not talking about craft moves like details, emphasis on certain things, repetition, you are not answering the prompt. I think people globally did a great job understanding these two texts, but we have to make sure we are answering what the question is asking of us. Okay, so hopefully you will have enough time today to revise and then submit it onto Rethink. I have unlocked the exit ticket, so you should be able to turn that in for feedback from me. I will do my best to get comments on there as much as possible. I'm out of town all weekend, so I'm not going to be able to give as much as I normally do. I hope you stay warm this weekend. It's supposed to get cold again. Super focused in class, please, even though I am not there, and make sure you are reading independently a ton this weekend. The SRI is coming up before we know it, and I want to make sure that nobody beats our record of growing the most. I want to make sure that we are still #1 and on track to lap the high school. All right. I miss you all. I hope you have a great Friday and a great weekend. Bye.